I want a child, just not with you, said the billionaire CEO. 3 years later he saw her again, and couldn't leave. Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. The conference room smelled like leather and yesterday's ambition. 14 executives sat frozen around a table carved from imported zebrawood, waiting. Dominic Cross stood at the window, his reflection sharp against the city skyline, saying nothing. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then a voice cut through, calm and unapologetic. Actually, you're wasting theirs. Every head turned. A woman stood near the projector, arms crossed, eyes like broken glass catching light. She wore charcoal gray, nothing expensive, nothing meant to impress. But somehow everyone else looked like they were trying too hard. Dominic's jaw tightened. Excuse me? You heard me. She moved toward the table with measured steps. You brought 12 people into this room, made them wait 20 minutes, and now you're dismissing their work without review. That's not leadership, Mr. Cross. That's ego. The room went silent. No one spoke to Dominic Cross like that. No one dared. He turned slowly, studying her with the kind of focus that made grown men look away. Most people flinched under that stare. She didn't. She just waited, like she had all day and nothing to prove. Everyone out. The executives scrambled for the door, grateful for escape. The woman remained exactly where she was. When the door clicked shut, Dominic stepped closer. You're either very brave or very stupid. I'm very expensive, she said. Which means I don't have time for theater. He almost smiled. Fair enough. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Besides trying to intimidate me? Besides that. She walked to the windows, and for a moment they stood side by side, two strangers looking out at a city full of people who would never know their names. You think control equals strength, she said quietly. It doesn't. It equals isolation. And right now, you're so isolated you can't see that your company is hemorrhaging talent because you treat people like chess pieces. Who are you? Rachel Bennett. The organizational psychologist his board had hired without asking him. And this was how it started. With a challenge. With a woman who refused to look away. With the beginning of the end of everything Dominic Cross thought he knew about himself. 3 days before that conference room confrontation, Dominic Cross woke up in a penthouse that cost more than most people made in a lifetime and felt absolutely nothing. The bed was king-sized, the sheets were Italian, the view stretched 40 floors above a city that never stopped moving. He stared at the ceiling for 10 minutes, trying to remember the last time he'd felt anything resembling joy. Nothing came. Just the familiar weight of another day to get through. Another series of meetings where people said yes because they were afraid to say no. Another evening alone in rooms too big for one person. He got up, showered in water that cost $1 a minute, dressed in a suit that cost what some people paid in rent, and drove to work in a car that purred like it knew it was better than everything else on the road. His assistant greeted him with coffee exactly how he liked it and a schedule packed so tight there was no room to think. Perfect. That's what Dominic preferred. No time to think meant no time to feel. The morning passed in a blur of acquisitions and dismissals. Someone pitched an idea. Dominic tore it apart in 3 sentences. Someone else suggested a strategy. Dominic explained why it wouldn't work before they finished talking. By lunch, he'd made 17 decisions that would affect hundreds of people and felt nothing about any of them. You seem distracted, his CFO said during their afternoon review. I'm fine. You've been fine for 3 years now. Maybe that's the problem. Dominic looked up sharply. Excuse me? Nothing. The CFO looked away first. They always did. The board meeting that afternoon was different though. Dominic walked in expecting the usual. Nervous executives, careful proposals, everyone waiting for his approval. Instead, he found a stranger sitting in the chair usually reserved for legal. This is Rachel Bennett, the chairman said. She's an organizational psychologist. We've brought her in to assess our leadership structure. Dominic's expression didn't change, but something cold moved through his chest. You hired a consultant without consulting me? We felt it was necessary. For Honestly? The chairman shifted in his seat. We're concerned about company culture. About retention. About whether the way we operate is sustainable long-term. You're concerned about me. It's not about blame, Dominic. It's about growth. Rachel Bennett said nothing during this exchange. She just watched, taking notes in a leather journal that looked older than she was. Dominic studied her. Mid-30s, maybe. Auburn hair pulled back in a way that was practical, not decorative. No jewelry except a watch that had seen better days. She wore confidence like other people wore cologne, subtle but unmistakable. And when she finally looked up and met his eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Someone who wasn't afraid of him. The meeting continued, but Dominic barely heard it. He kept waiting for Rachel to speak, to present some analysis or recommendation. She never did. She just watched and wrote and occasionally nodded like she was confirming theories no one else could see. When the meeting ended, she was the first to leave. Dominic found himself annoyed by that. People usually lingered around him, hoping for a moment of his time, a word of approval, anything. She just gathered her things and walked out like he was nobody special. He didn't see her again for 2 days. But he thought about her more than he wanted to admit. Thought about the way she'd looked at him, like she could see through the suits and the reputation to something underneath. Something broken. On the 3rd day, she showed up to the executive meeting unannounced. Dominic was mid-sentence, explaining why a proposed marketing strategy wouldn't work, when she interrupted. Actually, you're wasting theirs. And that's where everything changed. After Dominic dismissed the executives, leaving just the 2 of them in the conference room, Rachel moved to the windows overlooking the city. The afternoon sun cut through the glass at an angle that made everything look sharper than it was. You don't pull punches, Dominic said. I don't get paid to. What do you get paid to do? She turned to face him fully. Save men like you from yourselves. Something in her voice, not pity, not judgment, just brutal honesty, cracked something in Dominic's carefully constructed armor. He'd spent years building walls, and she'd found a weakness in 3 sentences. Have dinner with me. Oh. Why not? Because you're not asking for dinner, she said. You're asking for control. Dominic blinked. Every invitation he'd ever extended had been exactly that. A test, a transaction, a way to measure influence. What if I just wanted to talk? Then you'd be lying. She picked up her tablet from the conference table. Look, Mr. Cross. Dominic. Dominic, she corrected herself. I'm here to fix your company's image, not to become another story people whisper about at office parties. I wasn't suggesting anything inappropriate. Yes, you were. She moved toward the door. I'll have a strategy proposal on your desk by tomorrow morning. Try to read it with an open mind. She was halfway out when Dominic spoke again. What if I said I don't usually ask twice? Rachel paused, hand on the doorknob. Then I'd say you should practice. It builds character. The door closed behind her and Dominic stood alone in the conference room, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. Over the following 2 weeks, Rachel Bennett became a constant presence in Dominic's world. She sat in on meetings, challenged decisions, and refused every attempt he made to charm her. It was infuriating. It was fascinating. He started finding excuses to work late, knowing she'd be there, reviewing reports in the glass-walled office his board had assigned her. Sometimes he'd stand outside in the dim hallway, watching her work through the transparent walls. She'd sit there with her laptop glowing, occasionally pushing hair behind her ear, completely absorbed in whatever problem she was solving, trying to understand what made her different from everyone else who orbited his world. She caught him watching one evening, looked up from her screen, raised an eyebrow, held his gaze for 3 seconds. Dominic had the decency to look embarrassed before walking away. The next night, she left her office door open. An invitation, maybe. Or a challenge. Dominic accepted it as both. He found reasons to walk past her office. Stopped to ask questions that could have been emails. Lingered in conversations that didn't need to happen. Rachel handled each interaction with the same calm directness. She never flirted, never gave him an inch of ground, but she never dismissed him either. She just treated him like a person. Not a billionaire, not a CEO, just a man who happened to be in the room. It was the most honest he'd been treated in a decade. One night, well past midnight, he knocked on her open door. She looked up, unsurprised. "Let me guess. Can't sleep. How'd you know?" "Because you're standing outside my office at midnight instead of being home." "Can I come in?" "You're already in." Dominic sat in the chair across from her desk, uninvited. "Do you ever stop working?" "Do you?" "Touché." Rachel closed her laptop, giving him her full attention. That simple gesture, choosing to focus on him completely, made something in Dominic's chest tighten. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends on the question." "Why aren't you afraid of me?" She considered this, her expression thoughtful. "Because fear and respect aren't the same thing. You want people to fear you because it's easier than earning their respect." "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is." Rachel leaned back in her chair. "You're not scary, Dominic. You're lonely. And lonely people lash out because they don't know how to reach out." The words hit like a physical blow. Dominic had spent years perfecting his armor, building a reputation that made people step carefully around him. And she just pointed out every crack. "I'm not lonely." "Okay." "I said okay." Dominic ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Why do you do that?" "Do what?" "Agree without agreeing. It's maddening." Rachel smiled for the first time since he'd met her. "Good. You need more madness in your life." They sat in silence for a moment. The city lights glittered through the windows behind her, 50 floors of separation between them and the rest of the world. "When did you stop being a person and become a brand?" Rachel asked softly. The question gutted him because he knew the exact moment. He knew the day he decided feelings were liabilities and relationships were strategic assets. The day he'd stopped being Dominic and became Dominic Cross. "I don't know," he lied. "Liar." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're relentless. You're deflecting." Dominic met her eyes. "What do you want from me, Rachel?" "Nothing." Her voice was gentle now. "I don't want anything from you. That's why you can't figure me out." She was right. Every person in his life wanted something. Money, access, proximity to power, a story to tell at parties. Rachel just wanted him to be better. Not for her benefit. For his own. "What if I want something from you?" he asked quietly. "Like what?" "I don't know yet." Rachel stood, gathering her things. "Well, when you figure it out, let me know. I'm going home." "Wait." She paused. "Stay. Just a little longer." "Why?" "Because I don't want to be alone right now." The honesty surprised them both. Rachel's expression softened in a way he hadn't seen before. She set her bag down slowly. "Okay. But we're just talking." Just talking. So they talked. About everything and nothing. About the father who'd told Dominic he'd never amount to anything and spent his whole life proving him wrong only to realize the victory felt hollow. About Rachel's mother who'd died of cancer when Rachel was 19 and how she'd spent a decade trying to save other people because she couldn't save her. About fear disguised as ambition and dreams abandoned for survival. About the small scars that shaped people into who they became and the large wounds they learned to hide so well no one knew they were bleeding. Dominic found himself telling her things he'd never told anyone. Not his therapist, not his friends, not the handful of women who'd passed through his life leaving no mark. He told her about the fear of being ordinary. About building an empire and feeling emptier with each floor added to his tower. About waking up in penthouses and wondering if this was all there was. Rachel listened without trying to fix him. She didn't offer platitudes or solutions or advice. She just heard him. Really heard him. And somehow that was more valuable than anything else she could have given. "You're good at this," Dominic said as the sky outside lightened from black to purple. "At what?" "Making people feel less alone." Rachel's expression turned sad. "That's because I know what alone feels like." "You seem so confident though. So sure of yourself." "Confidence and loneliness aren't mutually exclusive." She wrapped her hands around her cold coffee cup. You can be good at your job and still go home to an empty apartment. You can have everything together and still wish someone cared enough to ask how your day was. How was your day? Dominic asked. Rachel smiled, genuine and warm. Better now. Somewhere around sunrise, the conversation stopped being just words. It became something else. Something neither of them had names for yet. A touch on the shoulder that lingered half a second too long. A hand that found another hand. A moment where the world outside the window ceased to exist, and the only thing that mattered was the person sitting 3 feet away. Dominic leaned forward. Stopped. Searched her face for permission. "This is a bad idea," Rachel whispered. "Probably. I don't do casual." "I know." He kissed her then. Softly, carefully, like she might break or disappear. She didn't pull away. Her hand came up to his face, fingertips tracing his jaw like she was memorizing the shape of it. They moved to the leather couch, the city waking up around them in shades of pink and gold. Two people who'd been alone so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. The connection between them was electric, honest, stripped of every pretense they'd been taught to wear. For once, Dominic wasn't performing. He wasn't the billionaire CEO, wasn't the man who had an answer for everything, wasn't trying to control or measure or win anything. He was just present. Vulnerable. Real. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows when Rachel finally pulled back. Her hair was tangled, her blouse wrinkled, her eyes holding his with an intensity that made his chest physically hurt. "I want something real, Dominic." Her voice was quiet but certain. Marriage one day. A family. A child who knows both parents. Not games, not transactions. Real. And that's when Dominic's mouth opened. But the words that came out weren't his. They were the voice of every fear he'd ever protected himself with. Every wall he'd built to keep people at arm's length. Every lesson he'd learned about not letting anyone close enough to hurt him. "You're confusing intimacy with ownership." The words hit the air like poison. Rachel's hands stilled on his chest. The warmth between them turned to ice so fast Dominic could physically feel it crystallizing. "What did you say?" Her voice was level, dangerously calm. Dominic's brain was screaming at him to stop, to take it back, to say anything else. But his pride, that vicious wounded pride that had protected him for so long, had already taken control. "I'm Dominic Cross. You're someone who works in my building." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of every possibility dying in real time. Every future they might have had turning to ash. Every moment of connection evaporating like it had never existed. Rachel stood with a grace that made the moment even worse. She didn't slam things, didn't raise her voice, didn't give him the satisfaction of a dramatic exit. She just began putting herself back together with methodical precision. Buttoning her blouse. Straightening her skirt. Smoothing hair his hands had tangled minutes ago. Each gesture careful and deliberate, like she was reassembling armor she'd been foolish enough to take off. "Rachel." Dominic's voice cracked on her name. "Don't." She held up one hand without looking at him. "Don't try to soften it now. I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did." She finally met his eyes, and Dominic wished she hadn't. The hurt there was brief, a flash of lightning before the storm. What replaced it was worse. Nothing. Absolute emptiness. "You meant every word. That's who you are when you're scared." "I'm not scared of anything." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're terrified. Someone just offered you something real and you reacted like a cornered animal." "I'm not terrified. I'm being realistic." "About what?" "About the fact that people always want something. About the fact that relationships are transactions whether we admit it or not. About the fact that you've been working here for 2 weeks and suddenly you think you know me." Rachel stopped moving, turned to face him fully. "I do know you, Dominic. I know you're brilliant and lonely and so afraid of being hurt that you hurt people first. I know you built a fortress so high you can't see over the walls anymore. I know you're dying inside and you don't even realize it because you've been dead so long you forgot what alive feels like." "Stop." "No." Her voice was steel now. "You want to talk about transactions? Fine. Here's the truth. I wasn't trying to trap you or change you or take anything from you. I was trying to see if the person I glimpsed in our conversations was real. If the man who told me about his fears and his loneliness and his dreams was actually in there somewhere. She picked up her bag, her laptop, the cardboard coffee cup from hours ago when the world had been different. But I have my answer now. That man isn't real. He's just another mask you wear when you want something. And what I want, what I told you I wanted, doesn't fit into your carefully calculated world. So congratulations, Mr. Cross. You win. You get to stay in your tower, completely safe, completely alone, completely in control. Where are you going? Away from here. Away from you. Rachel, please. I told you I wanted something real. She moved to the door, her hand on the handle. And you told me I wasn't worth the risk. Message received. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. She pulled the door open. Paused without turning around. I hope whatever you're protecting in that fortress of yours is worth it. Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty empty. The door closed with a soft click that somehow echoed louder than a slam ever could. Dominic stood in the center of the room surrounded by evidence of what had just happened. The wrinkled couch cushions. The empty coffee cups. The lingering scent of her perfume mixed with sunrise. He waited for relief to come. For the satisfaction of maintaining control, of protecting himself, of winning whatever twisted game his mind had convinced him they were playing. Nothing came. Just a hollow ache in his chest that felt suspiciously like loss. He pulled out his phone. Typed a message. Can we talk, please? Stared at it for 5 minutes. His thumb hovered over the send button. Then he thought about her face when he'd said those words. Thought about the way she'd looked at him like he'd slapped her. Thought about the emptiness in her eyes when she'd walked out. He deleted the message. She'd told him exactly who she was and what she wanted. He'd told her exactly what he thought of both. What else was there to say? The days that followed felt wrong in a way Dominic couldn't articulate. He went through the motions. Woke up, showered, went to work, attended meetings, made decisions. But everything felt muted, like he was watching his life through dirty glass. His assistant noticed first. Are you feeling all right, Mr. Cross? You've been distracted. I'm fine. It's just that you've been sitting in this meeting for 20 minutes and haven't said a word. Dominic looked up, realizing with a start that there were 6 people around the conference table, all watching him with concern. When had they even started talking? Apologies. Something came up. We'll reschedule. He stood abruptly and left them staring after him, confusion rippling through the room like wind over water. In his office, Dominic pulled up the security system. He told himself he was checking protocols, verifying access logs, doing his job. But his fingers navigated to the cameras covering Rachel's former office with the precision of muscle memory. Her desk was empty. No laptop, no files, no coffee cups, no leather journal. Just bare wood and a vacant chair catching afternoon light. Dominic's chest constricted painfully. His assistant appeared in the doorway. Miss Bennett's resignation letter arrived this morning. She's requesting immediate release from her contract. Dominic's hand stilled on the mouse. What reason did she give? Personal circumstances requiring relocation. Relocation where? She didn't specify. The assistant shifted uncomfortably. Should I deny the request? We could enforce the contract terms. She has another 3 months. No. Dominic's voice came out rougher than intended. Approve it. But sir, the board specifically hired her to. I said approve it. Yes, sir. Dominic read the letter 17 times. It was professional, brief, completely devoid of emotion. It said nothing and everything at once. He approved it immediately, signed his name with a pen that felt too heavy, and sent it back. Because making her stay would be another form of cruelty. And he'd already inflicted enough. Weeks bled into months. Dominic threw himself into work with a ferocity that impressed even his most ambitious colleagues. He acquired 2 companies in 1 quarter. Launched 3 new initiatives. expanded into territories his board had considered too risky. His net worth climbed. His influence spread. His empire grew. And he felt absolutely nothing. Late at night, alone in his penthouse, he'd catch himself reaching for his phone to text her. "Hey, thought you'd find this interesting. Look at this article. Remember when we talked about this?" Then he'd remember she'd blocked his number. Remember she'd walked away and never looked back. Remember that she was gone because he'd made sure of it. He'd see a woman with auburn hair across a restaurant, and his heart would lurch painfully before he realized it wasn't her. It was never her. His friends, the few he had, stopped inviting him to gatherings. Not because he was difficult, but because his presence was like a black hole. He'd stand in corners, nursing drinks he didn't taste, responding to questions with single words, sucking all the energy from rooms just by being in them. "You're different." One of them cornered him after a particularly silent dinner. "Ever since that consultant left." "I'm the same." "No, you're not. You used to be arrogant. Now you're just hollow." Dominic wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because it was true. He'd spent years building walls to protect himself, and now he was trapped inside them. Watching life happen through bulletproof glass. Being alive without living. Existing without meaning. One evening 6 months after Rachel left, his security chief mentioned casually that she'd been seen at a charity function across the country. Started her own consulting firm, apparently. Making quite a name for herself. Where? San Francisco. Different world out there. Dominic pulled up photos from the event on his tablet later that night. There she was. Laughing with clients. Shaking hands with sponsors. Giving a speech from a stage, her hands gesturing with passion he recognized. Looking exactly like someone who'd moved on with her life. He zoomed in on her face. Her smile reached her eyes now. She looked happy, free, complete. He looked like a ghost. That night Dominic stood at his windows until the city lights blurred into abstract patterns. He didn't cry. He'd forgotten how. He just stood there numb and empty, wondering when he'd stopped being human and started being this shell wearing expensive clothes. 3 months after that, 9 months since Rachel walked out of his life, Dominic sat alone in the conference room where they'd first met. The zebrawood table gleamed in afternoon light. The leather chairs sat empty. The windows overlooked a city full of people who'd never know his name and wouldn't care if they did. He pulled up old security footage on his tablet. Watched Rachel walk through the lobby on her first day. Into the elevator. Down the hall. Into his office. Watched her leave for the last time, her posture straight, her head high, her dignity intact. He didn't watch it again. Once was enough to understand that he'd destroyed something irreplaceable. Something he'd never find again, no matter how many years he spent looking. Dominic closed the tablet and sat in the dark, surrounded by everything he'd built and nothing that mattered. His phone buzzed. His assistant. "There's a national leadership summit next month. You've been invited to speak. They've asked specifically for you. Decline it." "But sir, this is a prestigious opportunity. The keynote speakers are all. Tell them I'm not interested." "Yes, sir." Dominic set the phone down. Then picked it up again. A thought occurring to him like light through crack in armor. "Who else is speaking?" "At the summit. I can send you the full roster if you'd like. Just the keynote speakers." One moment. The list came through. Dominic scrolled past names he recognized, industry leaders and best-selling authors and people he'd competed with for years. Then he saw it. Rachel Bennett, founder and CEO of Bennett Consulting. Keynote on ethical leadership. His hand started shaking. "Sir?" His assistant's voice through the phone. "Are you still there?" "Book it." "I'm sorry, what?" "Book the summit. Whatever it takes. I'll be there." "But you just said." "I changed my mind." "Yes, sir." "Right away, sir." Dominic ended the call. For the first time in 9 months, he felt something other than numbness. It wasn't hope. Hope required too much optimism, and he'd lost that capacity long ago. It was more like dread and anticipation twisted together. making his chest tight and his hands shake and his breath come faster. He had no plan. No idea what he'd say if he saw her. No illusion that she'd want to speak to him. No expectation of forgiveness or second chances or anything resembling redemption. But he'd be there anyway. Because the alternative, spending the rest of his life wondering, was finally worse than the fear of facing her. Because maybe, just maybe, seeing her one more time would give him the closure he needed to finally let go. Or maybe it would destroy what was left of him. Either way, he'd know. Across the country in a modest apartment in San Francisco, Rachel Bennett stared at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. Her hands were trembling. Not with fear. With something else entirely. She sat on the bathroom floor, back against cold tile, test still gripped between her fingers. The sun was setting through the small window above the sink, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. She wasn't crying. That surprised her. She'd expected tears, panic, that overwhelming sense of being trapped that every movie promised. Instead she felt oddly calm, centered even. A child. His child. Their child. No. Her child. The distinction mattered. Rachel had spent weeks after walking out of Dominic's office waiting for regret to find her. Waiting to second-guess her decision. Waiting for the pull of what they'd almost had to drag her back. It never came. Because what she'd felt for Dominic hadn't been love. Not yet anyway. It had been potential. Possibility. The ghost of what they could have been if he'd been braver. But he wasn't brave. And she wasn't interested in raising 2 children. Rachel stood slowly. Caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked the same. Same dark eyes. Same sharp features. Same woman who'd walked out of a penthouse office with her dignity intact. But something was different now. Something fundamental had shifted inside her. She was going to be someone's mother. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Over the following days, Rachel built a fortress of her own. Not made of money or power. Made of decisions. She told no one about Dominic. Listed no father on preliminary medical forms. Created a story so simple it was almost true. She'd wanted a child. Chosen to have one. Was doing this alone. People asked questions with their eyes more than their mouths. Rachel answered with a smile that didn't invite follow-up. Her new doctor, a kind woman with gray streaks in her hair, asked gently during the first appointment. Is the father involved? No. And he won't be? No. The doctor nodded. Made a note. Moved on. No judgment, no pity, just acceptance. Rachel was grateful for the simplicity of it. She threw herself into preparation with the same intensity she'd once applied to saving failing companies. Read every book. Took every class. Joined online groups where other women shared their fears and victories in the raw, honest language of experience. At night she'd sit in what would become the nursery, a room that was currently just a storage closet full of boxes, and talk to the child growing inside her. Your name is Liam, she'd whisper, hand on her barely there belly. Like strength. Like the warrior you're going to be. You're going to be so loved, baby boy. So wanted. You'll never have to beg for someone's attention or wonder if you're worth their time. You'll never have to earn love or prove you deserve it. It will just be there. Always. Unconditional. Forever. The promise felt sacred. Unbreakable. As her body changed, so did her life. She launched her consulting firm from her laptop and a dream. Took on clients who needed someone unafraid to tell hard truths. Built a reputation for insight and integrity. The business grew faster than she'd anticipated. Apparently there was demand for someone who actually cared about making companies better instead of just making them look better. Thomas Wright found her 6 months into her pregnancy. He was a self-made billionaire in sustainable architecture, older than Dominic by a decade, with kind eyes and a gentle presence. He'd heard about her work through industry channels and reached out about a leadership crisis in his company. They met for coffee. Rachel showed up visibly pregnant, assuming that would end the meeting quickly. Instead, Thomas smiled and said, "My daughter's about your age. 3 kids. I know that look. You're terrified and exhilarated, and you haven't slept through the night in months because the baby won't stop kicking." Rachel had laughed, surprised. All of that, plus heartburn that could strip paint. He became a client first, then a mentor, then a friend. Never pushed for more information than she offered. Never asked about the father. Just showed up consistently, offering support without expectation. The kind of friendship Rachel hadn't known she needed until it appeared. Liam was born on a Tuesday morning in early spring. There were complications. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to make it harder, longer, more painful than the books had promised. Rachel labored for 18 hours with only nurses rotating through. Each one efficient and kind, but ultimately strangers. When they finally placed Liam on her chest, tiny and wrinkled and screaming with the outrage of being born, Rachel felt something inside her break open. Not painfully. Beautifully. Like a dam giving way to water that had been held back too long. "Hi, baby boy." She was crying now, tears streaming unchecked. "Hi, sweet boy. I've been waiting for you." Liam's cries softened. His eyes, unfocused but searching, seemed to find her face. Rachel laughed through her tears, pressing her lips to his forehead. "You'll never have to beg for love." The words came out fierce and certain. "Never. You are wanted. You are chosen. You are mine." A nurse smiled from the corner, wiping at her own eyes. "He's beautiful." "He's perfect," Rachel corrected. Later, when the room was quiet and Liam was sleeping in the plastic bassinet beside her hospital bed, Rachel took out her phone. She had Dominic's number memorized even though she'd deleted it months ago. Typed it in. Attached a photo of Liam's tiny hand curled around her finger. Started to write a message. "You have a son. His name is Liam. He's perfect and he'll never know you hurt me." Her thumb hovered over send. She stared at the screen until her vision blurred. Then she deleted the message. Deleted the photo. Put the phone away. Some truths were too important to dilute with complications. Some stories were better left unshared. Some wounds healed cleaner when you stopped picking at them. Rachel Bennett had made her choice. And she would spend the rest of her life making sure Liam never regretted it. 3 years can feel like a lifetime or a moment, depending on what you're running from. For Rachel, those years were full. Liam learned to walk in their small apartment, taking his first wobbly steps between the coffee table and the couch. When he made it across without falling, his face lit up with triumph and Rachel scooped him up, spinning him around until they were both dizzy and laughing. "That's my boy. You're unstoppable." Liam squealed with pure delight, the sound bright and clean, and Rachel felt that surge of fierce love that still sometimes caught her off guard. Life had a rhythm now. Morning routines and afternoon naps and bedtime stories read in silly voices. Rachel had built her consulting practice into something real, working from home while Liam played nearby, learning to balance client calls with snack time, strategy sessions with scraped knees. Friends emerged from unexpected places. Other mothers at the park who became her village. Neighbors who showed up with casseroles when she had the flu. A community that wrapped around Rachel and Liam like protective arms, chosen family in the truest sense. Thomas remained a steady presence. He sent thoughtful birthday gifts. Showed up to the terrible preschool performance where Liam forgot all his lines and just stood there waving at Rachel. Offered business advice and genuine friendship with no hidden agenda. "You're doing an incredible job," Thomas said one afternoon, watching Liam stack blocks with the intense concentration he applied to everything. "Some days I'm not so sure." That's how you know you're doing it right. The ones who think they have all the answers are usually getting it wrong. Rachel appreciated Thomas more than she could express. He was steady where Dominic had been volatile. Present where Dominic had been absent. Kind where Dominic had been cruel. But she also knew, with quiet certainty, that Thomas would never be more than a friend. That part of her had closed the morning Dominic told her she was just someone who worked in his building. Liam, for his part, was becoming a force of nature. Stubborn, curious, wildly independent one moment and clingy the next. He had Rachel's determination but someone else's bone structure. The strong jaw. The way his brow furrowed when he concentrated. The shape of his eyes. Rachel tried not to see Dominic in her son's face. Most days she succeeded. "Mama, no daddy?" Liam asked one morning while Rachel was helping him get dressed. At barely 3, his sentences were simple and direct, cutting through pretense adults spent years constructing. Rachel's hands stilled for just a second on his shirt, then continued smoothly. "Some families have mama and daddy. Some have one. Some have more. We have us. Is good." Liam's grammar was still developing, each mistake endearing in its honesty. "Good. You're the best mama." Rachel kissed the top of his head, blinking back sudden tears. "And you're the best, Liam." The conversation didn't come up again. Liam was content with their world, small but full, simple but rich. Meanwhile, 900 miles away, Dominic Cross was collapsing inward like a dying star. His empire continued to expand, but he'd become a figurehead in his own company. Board members made decisions. Executives ran divisions. Dominic signed papers and attended meetings where his presence was required, but his input was increasingly optional. "He's not the same," his CFO said during a private board conversation. "Hasn't been for years. He's not making bad decisions, though. He's not making any decisions at all. Just signs whatever we put in front of him." Should we be worried? I don't know. Maybe he's finally learned to delegate. This doesn't feel like delegation. It feels like absence. Absent was exactly right. Dominic moved through his days like a ghost haunting his own life. He woke up in the same penthouse, wore the same expensive clothes, drove the same luxury car. But none of it felt real anymore. None of it meant anything. The parties stopped inviting him after he attended one and stood in a corner for 2 hours without speaking to anyone before leaving without saying goodbye. Just disappeared into the night like smoke. The women who'd once pursued him gave up after he turned down advances with polite disinterest that felt more like indifference. The friends he'd accumulated through ambition and proximity gradually stopped calling when their messages went unanswered for weeks. Dominic let it all slip away. What was the point of pretending? Late at night he'd stand at his windows and wonder what Rachel was doing. If she ever thought about him. If she'd found someone worthy of the love she'd offered him so freely that morning. If she was happy. The wondering ate at him quietly, a slow erosion he barely noticed until he looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize the man staring back. His assistant, loyal despite everything, tried occasionally to pull him back to something resembling engagement. "There's a summit next month. National level. You've been invited to speak on innovation in leadership." Decline. "It would be good for the company. Someone else can go. They specifically asked for you, sir. They'll survive the disappointment." But the assistant was persistent. Had worked for Dominic long enough to know when to push. Brought it up again a week later. The summit organizers called again. "They really want you there. Said it wouldn't be the same without you. I'm not interested in." Rachel Bennett is speaking. Dominic's head snapped up so fast his neck cracked. "What? Rachel Bennett? She's giving the opening keynote on ethical leadership. I thought." His assistant's voice was careful. "I thought you might want to know." Dominic's hands were shaking. "Book it, sir. Book the summit. Whatever it takes. Cancel everything else. I'll be there." The assistant blinked, surprised by the sudden intensity. "Really?" "Yes." "Immediately." "Right away, sir." For the first time in 3 years, Dominic felt something other than the crushing weight of numbness. It wasn't hope. Hope required optimism he no longer possessed. It was more like dread and need twisted together so tightly he couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Rachel received the summit invitation with complicated feelings. Part of her wanted to decline immediately. Wanted to avoid any possibility, however remote, of running into Dominic. But the larger part, the part that had built a life and a business and a future from scratch, refused to let old fear dictate new choices. "I've earned this platform," she told Thomas over coffee while Liam colored at the table beside them. "I'm not going to hide because of something that happened years ago." "Good," Thomas said firmly. "But if you need backup, I'm happy to attend. Give you moral support. That would be helpful, actually." Rachel admitted. Liam could use a familiar face if I'm busy networking. Thomas smiled. I'd be honored. The night before leaving for the summit, Rachel tucked Liam into bed in their apartment. His room was small but filled with love. Drawings taped to walls. Books stacked on shelves. A nightlight shaped like a rocket ship casting soft shadows. Big day tomorrow, Mama? Liam asked sleepily, his words still slightly muddled by exhaustion. That's right, baby. Thomas comes too. Yep. He's going to take you to see the aquarium while Mama works. Liam yawned, already drifting. Love you, Mama. Love you more, sweet boy. Rachel sat beside his bed long after he fell asleep, watching his chest rise and fall with the steady rhythm of complete trust. Feeling the weight of what tomorrow might bring. She didn't know Dominic would be there. Had no reason to suspect their paths would cross in a conference of hundreds. But somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the armor she'd built from necessity and choice, a part of her wondered if she was ready to see him again. And whether she'd recognize the man who'd broken her heart, or if he'd become someone else entirely. Someone worse. Or perhaps, against all odds, someone better. Rachel fell asleep with the question unanswered, not knowing that tomorrow would shatter the careful peace she'd built and force her to confront truths she'd been avoiding for 3 years. That some wounds don't heal, they just wait. That some chapters don't close, they just pause. That some people leave marks that time can't erase no matter how hard you try to scrub them away. The morning started with rain. Not the gentle kind but angry sheets that turned highways into rivers and made visibility a dangerous luxury. Thomas drove carefully, his hands steady on the wheel, while Rachel sat in the passenger seat reviewing her keynote notes for the 3rd time. You're going to be brilliant, Thomas said, glancing at her. You know this material inside and out. I know. She set the notes down, restless. I just want everything to be perfect. It will be. You're one of the best speakers I've ever heard. In the back seat, Liam was already asleep, his head lolled to one side, small mouth slightly open, clutching the stuffed lion he couldn't sleep without. Rachel turned to check on him, felt that familiar surge of protective love. He's fine, Thomas said gently. Relax. I can't. What if something goes wrong? What if the childcare at the summit isn't good enough? What if he gets scared and I'm not there? Then I'll be there. Thomas reminded her patiently. That's why you asked me to come, remember? Rachel managed a smile. Thank you. For all of this. For driving us. For helping with Liam. For being a friend, Thomas finished. Which is exactly what I want to be. No pressure, no expectations. Just someone who shows up. The rain had stopped by the time they reached the summit venue, but the sky remained gray and threatening, heavy with unspent weather. Thomas parked, helped Rachel unload their bags, then scooped up a still sleeping Liam with practiced ease that came from years of being a father himself. I'll get him settled in the childcare room, Thomas said. You go check in and prepare for your moment. Rachel watched them walk toward the entrance, Thomas's broad back, Liam's small form nestled against his shoulder, and felt grateful for the chosen family she'd built. For people who showed up without needing to be asked. For love that didn't come with conditions or contracts. Inside, the summit venue buzzed with energy. Hundreds of people in business attire mingling, networking, exchanging cards and carefully calibrated smiles. The air smelled like coffee and ambition. Rachel found the check-in desk, collected her speaker badge, made her way backstage. A production assistant met her with a bottle of water and a wireless microphone. You're on in 20 minutes. No podium, you'll have the whole stage. Wireless mic. Just clip it and go. Perfect. Rachel found a quiet corner backstage to center herself. Breathed slowly. Reviewed her opening lines one final time. Reminded herself that she'd earned this moment through years of hard work, and no ghost from her past could take it away. When they called her name, she walked onto that stage like she owned it. The lights were bright enough that she couldn't see individual faces in the audience. Just shapes, shadows, the vague impression of hundreds of people watching. Better that way. Less pressure. Good morning. Her voice carried clearly through the hall. I'm Rachel Bennett, and I'm here to talk about something we claim to value but rarely practice. Accountability. The audience settled, leaned forward. She had them. Accountability isn't weakness. Rachel moved across the stage with confidence born from experience. It's the foundation of trust. And trust is the only currency that actually matters in leadership. You can buy loyalty. You can demand obedience. But you cannot purchase genuine trust. That has to be earned through consistency, honesty, and the willingness to admit when you're wrong. In the back row, partially hidden by a support column, Dominic Cross sat frozen. His entire world had narrowed to the woman on stage. She looked different. Stronger somehow. More solid. The uncertainty he'd glimpsed in those late-night conversations was gone, replaced by the kind of confidence that came from surviving something difficult and emerging intact on the other side. The difference between power and integrity, Rachel continued, is what you do when no one's watching. When there's no board to impress, no shareholders to appease, no cameras recording your actions. That's when your true character shows. And that's what people remember long after your quarterly earnings are forgotten. Dominic's hands gripped the armrests of his seat. He'd made a terrible mistake coming here. The certainty hit him like a physical blow. What had he been thinking? That she'd see him and somehow everything would be okay? That 3 years would have dulled the edges of what he'd done? He started to stand, intending to leave before she saw him, before he made this worse. But the movement caught attention. People turned. Whispered. Someone near him said too loudly, "Is that Dominic Cross? Why is he here?" He sat back down heavily, trapped by his own reputation. By the attention he'd spent years cultivating and now couldn't escape. Rachel finished her keynote to enthusiastic applause. She smiled, waved, exited stage left, feeling the familiar post-speech high of a job well done. The adrenaline singing through her veins. Thomas met her in the green room, grinning. "You were phenomenal. The moderator wants to know if you're available for the closing panel tomorrow. They want you back." "Really?" Rachel sat down, taking a long drink of water. "That's wonderful. Where's Liam?" "The childcare room. He made a friend. They're building something elaborate with blocks." Thomas laughed. "Something about dinosaurs fighting robots. I didn't ask too many questions." "Perfect. Give me 10 minutes to decompress, then I'll go get him." "Take your time. I'll grab you something to eat from the reception." Rachel nodded gratefully. Thomas left and she sat alone in the quiet room, letting the adrenaline slowly drain away, feeling the exhaustion underneath. The reception hall was chaos when she finally emerged. Hundreds of people mingling, drinking, networking with the aggressive determination of professionals who measured success in connections made. Rachel moved through the crowd accepting congratulations, exchanging business cards, having the same conversation with slight variations 24 times. Then she saw Thomas near the windows, waving her over. She started toward him, relieved to see a friendly face in the sea of strangers. That's when she felt it. That prickling sensation of being watched. She turned, scanning the crowd, and saw him. Dominic stood 30 feet away, partially hidden by a group of executives. But she'd recognize that posture anywhere. The way he held himself like he was always braced for impact. The set of his shoulders that suggested confidence but hid tension. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Rachel's smile dropped from her face. Not slowly. Instantaneously. Like someone had cut the power. Dominic started moving toward her, weaving through the crowd. Rachel's first instinct was to run. To grab Liam and leave before this got complicated. But she'd spent 3 years building a life where she didn't run from hard things. Where she faced what scared her. So she stood her ground, watching him approach, her heart hammering against her ribs. Thomas noticed her expression change. Followed her gaze. Saw Dominic approaching. His body shifted subtly, moving slightly in front of Rachel. "Protective. Rachel." Thomas said quietly. "It's fine." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I can handle this." Dominic stopped a respectful distance away. Up close, Rachel could see the changes 3 years had carved into him. the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, the gray at his temples, the way he looked thinner, more drawn, like he'd been slowly eroding. "Hello, Rachel." His voice was rough, uncertain. "Dominic." Her tone was flat, giving nothing. Thomas looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. "You're him." "Thomas, it's okay," Rachel said without taking her eyes off Dominic. "I'll be right over there if you need me." Thomas's tone made it clear this was both a statement and a threat. When they were as alone as you could be in a room full of people, Dominic tried to form words. "Failed. Tried again. You were incredible up there. Thank you." Silence stretched between them, filling with 3 years of everything unsaid. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Why would you?" "Fair point." Dominic shifted his weight. "I'm glad I came anyway, though." "Are you?" "Not a question. A challenge." Rachel's voice was ice. Dominic's carefully constructed composure began to crack. "I've thought about you every day for the past 3 years. That sounds exhausting for you." "It is." "Good." The word hit him like a slap. Deserved, but it still stung. "Rachel, I." A commotion near the entrance cut through his words. A child's voice, high and distressed, piercing through the cocktail chatter. "Mama." Rachel's entire body changed. Every muscle tensing. Every sense sharpening. "Liam." She moved toward the sound immediately, forgetting Dominic, forgetting the conversation, forgetting everything except that voice. Dominic followed automatically, confused, trying to understand what was happening. A little boy stood near the doorway crying, tears streaming down his face, looking frantically around the crowded room. He wore a blue shirt with a cartoon dinosaur on it. His dark hair stuck up in every direction. He couldn't have been more than 3 years old. "Mama." The cry was heartbreaking in its desperation. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Rachel was already moving, already reaching for him. "What happened? Where's the caretaker?" A flustered young woman in a staff shirt hurried over, apologetic. "I'm so sorry. He just bolted when I was helping another child. The child care room is right by this entrance, and he must have heard the noise and he's fast. I tried to catch him." "It's okay." Rachel's tone suggested it very much wasn't. She turned her attention fully to the child. "Liam, sweetheart, you can't run off like that. You scared Mama. Wanted you." The boy hiccuped against Rachel's shoulder, his words simple but clear. "Missed you." "I know, baby. But you have to stay where Mama can find you." "Okay. Okay." Rachel rocked him gently, murmuring comfort, completely focused on calming her son. The noise of the reception faded into background static. 10 feet away, Dominic stood frozen. His brain was struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. The child. The little boy in Rachel's arms. Dark hair. Fair skin. And when he finally turned his tear-streaked face away from Rachel's shoulder, wiping his eyes with small fists, Dominic saw his own eyes staring back at him. Gray-green. Unmistakable. Identical. His champagne glass slipped from numb fingers, hitting the marble floor with a crash that made several people gasp and turn. But Dominic didn't notice. Couldn't notice. Because the world had just tilted violently sideways and he couldn't find his balance. That was his child. His son. Rachel had had a child and he was his. The math was simple. Brutal. Undeniable. The timing. The features. The way the little boy's jaw set when he stopped crying. It was all there, written in genetics and time and truth that couldn't be argued with. Rachel looked up. Saw Dominic's face. Saw the recognition blooming there like blood in water. Her expression hardened instantly. "No." Her voice was quiet but fierce. "Don't." But Dominic couldn't stop staring. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process anything except the overwhelming reality crashing over him in waves that threatened to drown him. He had a son. And he'd missed everything. "Rachel." Dominic's voice came out barely above a whisper. "How old is he?" "That's none of your business." Rachel adjusted her grip on Liam, who had stopped crying but was watching the strange man with wary curiosity. How old? 3. 3 years old. The confirmation hit Dominic like a punch. He did the math again, knowing the answer but needing to hear it. When's his birthday? Rachel's jaw clenched. April 15th. 9 months. 9 months, almost to the day after that morning in his office. After he'd destroyed everything. He's mine. Dominic took a step forward. Rachel flinched back so violently that several people nearby stopped their conversations. Don't. Her voice rose enough to draw more attention. Don't you dare. He's my son too. He's my son. Rachel's eyes were blazing now. Mine. You gave up any claim to him the moment you made me feel worthless. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. Rachel was backing toward the exit now, Liam clinging to her neck, starting to whimper again, frightened by the tension he could feel but not understand. You made it very clear that I was nothing to you, that what we shared meant nothing, that I was just someone who worked in your building. So forgive me if I decided to protect my son from ever hearing those words. Jennifer, please. Thomas appeared then, having pushed through the crowd. His hand came to rest on Rachel's shoulder. I think you should step back. Dominic looked at Thomas, really looked at him for the first time. Saw the protective stance. The familiar way he touched Rachel. The rage that swept through Dominic was irrational and overwhelming. Is this? We're leaving. Rachel cut him off. Thomas, can you get our things? Already done. The car's out front. Rachel started walking. Dominic followed, his feet moving without permission from his brain. People were staring now, whispers spreading through the reception like wildfire. Jennifer, wait. Stop calling me that. She didn't slow down. My name is Rachel and you don't get to use it anymore. They made it to the parking garage. The concrete structure echoing with their footsteps. Rachel was moving fast toward a sedan where Thomas was already loading bags. Please. Dominic's voice broke. Please, just let me. Let you what? Rachel whirled on him and the fury in her face was terrifying. Let you explain? Let you make excuses? Let you meet the son you didn't want? I was scared. Rachel laughed, sharp and bitter, startling Liam into tears again. She immediately softened her voice, bouncing him. Shoo, baby. It's okay. Mama's okay. But she wasn't okay. Her hands were shaking. Tears were streaming down her face despite her attempts to wipe them away. Everyone is scared. Dominic. Her voice was quieter now but no less fierce. Everyone who loves someone is scared. That's not an excuse. That's just being human. And you chose your fear over me. Over us. I know. The admission came out wrecked. I know I did and I've regretted it every single day since. Regret doesn't raise a child. Rachel moved to buckle Liam into his car seat. Regret doesn't wake up at 3 in the morning with a screaming infant. Regret doesn't change diapers or sing lullabies or teach him to be brave when the world is scary. I did that alone, Dominic. Alone. Because you made your choice. Tell me how to fix this. You can't. There has to be. There doesn't. Rachel closed the car door, making sure Liam was secure. Then turned to face Dominic fully. Some things can't be fixed. Some mistakes are permanent. She started to get in the driver's seat. Dominic moved forward, desperate. Jennifer. His name is Liam. She cut him off. And he's 3 years old and he's never asked about you because I've made sure he feels so loved he doesn't notice you're missing. So no, you don't get to fix this. You don't get to show up 3 years later and play father. You don't get anything. That's not fair. Fair? Rachel's voice rose again. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I spent 9 months growing a human alone? Is it fair that I gave birth alone, terrified out of my mind, with no one to hold my hand? Is it fair that every single milestone, his first smile, his first word, his first step, I experienced alone because you made it clear I wasn't worth the risk? Each word landed like a hammer blow. Dominic felt his knees weakening. He leaned against her car for support. I wanted to tell you. Rachel's voice cracked now, tears flowing freely. God, Dominic, I wanted to tell you so badly. I had the phone in my hand 100 times. But every time I started to dial, I remembered the look on your face when I told you what I wanted. The disgust. The contempt. And I couldn't. She was sobbing now, the kind of crying that came from 3 years of suppressed pain finally breaking free. I couldn't risk you looking at him that way. Children know when they're not wanted. They always know. I wouldn't have. Yes, you would have. Rachel's voice was certain through the tears. Maybe not intentionally. Maybe not obviously. But he would have felt it. And I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let my son grow up feeling like he had to earn his father's love. Dominic sank to his knees on the concrete garage floor. His legs simply gave out. He was crying now too, tears streaming freely, no attempt to stop them. I wanted him. The words came out choked. If I'd known, I would have. Would have what? Rachel looked down at him. Tried to buy your way into his life? Hired lawyers? Fought me for custody? Used your money and power to take him from me because you suddenly decided he was worth having? No. Dominic could barely speak through the sobs. No, I would have tried. I would have tried to be better. For him. For you. Rachel crouched down so they were eye level. But you didn't try to be better for yourself. And that's the problem, Dominic. You only want to change because you got caught. Not because you realized what you did was wrong. The truth of it silenced him completely. Rachel stood, wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders with visible effort. I'm going to go now. I'm going to take my son back to our hotel room and I'm going to hold him while he falls asleep. And tomorrow I'm going to take him home to our life. And you're going to stay out of it. Rachel, please. Goodbye, Dominic. She got in the car, started the engine. Dominic remained on his knees in the parking garage, watching her taillights disappear up the ramp and into the fading daylight. Thomas stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable. She's right, you know, Thomas said quietly. About all of it. Dominic couldn't respond. Could barely breathe through the sobs wrecking his chest, tearing him apart from the inside. But I've also never seen anyone look as destroyed as you do right now. Thomas continued. So maybe, just maybe, there's hope for you yet. Maybe. He got in his own car and drove away, leaving Dominic alone on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by oil stains and tire marks and the wreckage of his own making. Dominic stayed there until his tears ran out, until his knees ached from the hard floor, until security found him and asked if he needed medical attention. No. He managed. I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. Would never be fine again. Because he'd just seen his son for the first time. And the boy had looked at him like he was a stranger. Which was exactly what he was. Dominic didn't go to his hotel. Didn't call anyone. Didn't do anything except sit in his car in that parking garage, staring at nothing until his phone died and the parking attendant knocked on his window to tell him they were closing for the night. He drove. No destination in mind. Just drove through unfamiliar streets in an unfamiliar city, watching other people's lives through lit windows. Families eating dinner. Children being put to bed. The mundane rituals of normalcy he'd never be part of. His hotel room was sterile, anonymous. Chain hotel furniture and abstract art that meant nothing. Dominic stood at the window overlooking the city, watching traffic lights change colors far below, and wondered if this was all his life would ever be. Empty rooms and hollow victories, and the ghost of what he could have had if he'd been braver. His phone charged enough to turn back on. 17 missed calls. Dozens of messages. He ignored all of them except one. An email from an unknown address. No subject line. Just a photo. Liam. Smiling at the camera, holding a stuffed lion, his eyes bright with joy. Below it, a single line of text. His name is Liam Cross Bennett. He likes dinosaurs and swimming and books about space. He's afraid of the dark but brave about everything else. He asks questions constantly. He's kind to other kids. He's the best thing I've ever done. You don't get to be part of his life. But you should know he exists. Rachel. Dominic stared at that photo until his vision blurred. Traced his finger over his son's face on the screen. This child. This perfect child who carried half his DNA and none of his damage. Who smiled like he'd never known disappointment. Who existed in the world and didn't know his father's name. The grief that crashed over Dominic then was unlike anything he'd ever felt. Worse than losing his company would have been. Worse than any failure or rejection or loss. Because this was his son. And he'd missed 3 years. 3 years of smiles and questions and firsts that he'd never get back. 3 years of life he'd never witness, moments he'd never share, memories that didn't include him. He'd thought losing Rachel was the worst thing that could happen. But this was worse. This was knowing he'd lost something before he even knew it existed. Dominic looked at that photo for hours. Memorizing every detail. The way Liam's hair stuck up on one side. The gap between his front teeth. The dinosaur on his shirt. The absolute joy on his face. And he made a decision. He had no right to be in Liam's life. Rachel had made that abundantly clear, and she was absolutely right. But that didn't mean he had to stay a stranger forever. It just meant he had to become someone worth knowing. Someone who deserved a second chance. Someone who changed not because he got caught, but because he finally understood what mattered. The next morning, Dominic flew home. Not to his penthouse. To a therapist's office he'd been ignoring for 3 years. "I need help," he told the surprised receptionist. "I need to become someone different than who I am." The therapist, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, listened to his story without judgment. Then said, "The question isn't whether you can change. It's whether you're willing to do the work even if it never gets you what you want. Even if Rachel never forgives you and Liam never knows you. Because real change doesn't come with guarantees." "I understand." "Do you?" Because most people want change to be transactional. They want to put in effort and get a specific result. But life doesn't work that way. Sometimes you do everything right and still lose. Sometimes the best thing you can do is become better for its own sake, not because it earns you anything. I just want to be someone my son would be proud of, even if he never knows I exist. Then we have a lot of work to do. They started that day. Twice a week, Dominic sat in that office and took apart everything he'd built himself into. Examined every defense mechanism. Questioned every belief about power and control and love. It was brutal work. The kind that left him exhausted and raw. But he kept showing up. Because for the first time in his life, the stakes weren't professional. They were personal. They were about becoming human again. Weeks passed. Then months. Dominic restructured his entire life. Stepped back from daily operations at his company, trusting executives he'd never trusted before. Started saying no to things that didn't matter and yes to things that did. Volunteered at a children's literacy program, reading to kids who reminded him painfully of Liam. Learned what it felt like to give without expecting anything in return. His assistant noticed the changes first. "You seem different, sir. More present somehow." "I'm trying to be. It shows." One evening, 6 months after the summit, Dominic sat in his therapist's office and said something he'd never said out loud. "I don't know if I'll ever meet my son. I don't know if Rachel will ever let me try. But I need to become someone worthy of the chance anyway. Because he deserves better than who I was." "That's growth." His therapist smiled. "Real, genuine growth. So what now?" "Now I wait. And I keep working. And I hope. But not for a specific outcome. I just hope I become someone who could be a good father. Even if I never get the opportunity." Her response was gentle. "That's all any of us can do. Change for its own sake and hope it's enough." That night, Dominic sent an email to the unknown address Rachel had used. "I don't expect a response. I don't deserve one. But I want you to know I heard you. All of it. You were right about everything. I can't fix the past. I can't undo the damage. I can't erase 3 years. But I can become someone different. Not for you. Not even for Liam, though he's all I think about. For myself. Because you were right. I was dying inside and didn't even know it. I'm trying to live now. Really live. I don't know if that matters to you. It probably doesn't. But I wanted you to know anyway. Take care of our son. Tell him stories. Teach him to be brave. Love him the way I was too afraid to love you. He's lucky to have you. Dominic. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The response came 3 days later. Short and devastating. I'm glad you're getting help. You needed it. But therapy doesn't erase what you did. It doesn't change the years Liam and I built without you. I hope you find peace, Dominic. I really do. But find it somewhere else. Not in our lives. Rachel. Dominic read it once. Accepted it. And kept working anyway. Because she was right. This wasn't about earning forgiveness. It was about becoming someone worth forgiving, even if that forgiveness never came. 3 months later, he sent another email. Just a photo this time. Dominic reading to kids at the literacy center, surrounded by children Liam's age, a real smile on his face for the first time in years. No explanation. No plea. Just proof that he was trying. Rachel didn't respond. 2 months after that, he sent a donation to Rachel's company. Anonymous. Substantial. Earmarked for a scholarship fund for single parents pursuing business degrees. Rachel figured out it was him. Sent it back with a note. I don't want your money. I never did. So Dominic redirected it. Same scholarship. Different organization. No way to trace it back to him. Small acts of becoming someone different. Of learning to give without needing credit. Of changing for its own sake. He didn't know if Rachel ever found out. Didn't matter. That wasn't why he did it. 9 months after the summit, Dominic received a message from an unexpected source. Thomas Wright. We need to talk. Can you meet me for coffee? Dominic's heart raced. He almost said no. Almost protected himself from whatever this might be. Then said yes. Because the old Dominic would have hidden. And he was trying to be someone new. They met at a neutral location. A quiet cafe far from both their offices. Thomas ordered black coffee and got straight to the point. Rachel doesn't know I'm here. Then why are you? Because I've watched her for the past year. Thomas's expression was serious. And I've watched you. Watched me. I keep tabs on people who matter to people I care about. It's what I do. Thomas took a sip of his coffee. And what I've seen is interesting. You've changed. Trying to. Thomas studied him. Why? Because I want to be someone my son would be proud of. Even if he never knows I exist. That's the right answer. Thomas set his cup down. But wanting isn't enough. Proving is what matters. And how do I prove that? You don't prove it to me. You prove it to her. And that takes time and consistency and absolutely zero expectation of reward. I understand. Dominic's hands were shaking. Is that why you're here? To test me? Thomas's expression softened slightly. I'm here because she's struggling. With what? With whether to let you try. Dominic's heart stopped. What? Liam asked about his father last week. First time he's ever asked directly. And Rachel realized she can't keep running from this forever. He deserves to know where he comes from. Even if where he comes from is complicated. What did she say to him? Thomas looked at him steadily. She said his father made mistakes but might be trying to be better. That sometimes people need time to grow up even when they're already grown. That maybe someday they'd talk about it more. She said that. Don't get excited. Thomas held up a warning hand. She also said she's not sure she'll ever trust you. That she's terrified you'll hurt Liam the way you hurt her. That letting you in might be the biggest mistake she could make. I won't hurt him. You already have. By not being there. Thomas's words were brutal but true. The question is whether you'll keep hurting him or whether you'll prove you've actually changed. How do I prove that? Thomas slid a piece of paper across the table. An address. A time. Next Saturday. She's agreed to meet you. To talk. Just talk. No promises. No guarantees. If you show up late, she's gone. If you push for more than she's ready to give, she's gone. If you make this about you instead of about Liam, she's gone. Do you understand? Dominic's hands trembled as he picked up the paper. I understand. I mean it, Dominic. Thomas's voice was hard. This is probably the only chance you'll ever get. Don't waste it. I won't. I swear I won't. Time will tell. Thomas stood. One more thing. What? Don't make me regret advocating for you. Because if you hurt that boy or his mother, there isn't a lawyer or a dollar amount that will protect you from me. Do we understand each other? We do. Good. Thomas left. Dominic sat in the cafe for another hour, staring at the address, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. This was it. The chance he didn't deserve but had been given anyway. Grace he hadn't earned but would spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of. He had 6 days to prepare. 6 days to become ready for the most important conversation of his life. 6 days to figure out how to be humble and honest and completely focused on what Liam needed instead of what Dominic wanted. It wasn't enough time, but it was all he had. So Dominic spent those 6 days in therapy, working through every possible scenario, writing down and throwing away 100 different speeches, learning to sit with his own discomfort and fear without letting it control him. When Saturday morning came, he was terrified, but he was ready. As ready as someone could be to meet the woman whose heart he'd broken and ask for the impossible. For a chance to know his son. For the opportunity to prove that people could change. For hope that Grace might still exist in a world where he'd done everything wrong. Dominic arrived at the address 30 minutes early. It was a park. Children's playground visible in the distance. Families scattered across green spaces. Normal life happening all around him. He sat on a bench near the fountain Thomas had specified. Waited. Watched the minutes tick by on his phone. Tried to breathe. At exactly 10 o'clock, he saw her. Rachel. Walking across the grass toward him. And holding her hand, taking 2 steps for every one of hers, was Liam. His son. 3 years old and real and alive and here. Dominic stood on shaking legs. Every instinct screaming at him to run toward them. But he held himself still. Let them come to him. Let Rachel control this. When they were 10 feet away, Rachel stopped. Liam looked up at her, confused. Then looked at Dominic with open curiosity. Rachel met Dominic's eyes. Her expression was guarded, exhausted, but not actively hostile. Progress, maybe. Thank you for coming. Dominic's voice came out rough. Thank you for letting me. Rachel's jaw tightened. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because my son asked about his father and he deserves better than my anger. Fair enough. Dominic crouched down slowly, making himself less intimidating. Hi, Liam. Liam partially hid behind Rachel's leg, watching Dominic with those familiar gray-green eyes. Who you? Dominic looked up at Rachel, silently asking permission. She gave the smallest nod. I'm Dominic. I'm your father. Liam processed this with the seriousness he applied to everything. Why you not here before? The question drove a knife straight through Dominic's heart. Because I made a mistake. A big one. And I'm trying to fix it now. Mama say sorry when mistake. Your mama is very smart. And absolutely right. Liam studied him for another long moment. Then asked with typical 3-year-old logic, You like playgrounds? Dominic had to stop and clear his throat. I don't know. I haven't been to one in a very long time. You come see. Liam decided, tugging Rachel's hand. Swings. Rachel looked at Dominic. Her expression unreadable. You can stay for a little while. But if he gets uncomfortable, You leave immediately. No arguments. Understood. Understood. And they walked together toward the playground. Liam between them. Not a family. Not yet. Maybe never. But three people taking the first fragile steps toward something that might, with time and work and grace, become whole. Dominic didn't know if this would work. Didn't know if Rachel would ever forgive him, or if Liam would ever call him dad, or if he'd ever be more than a stranger trying to earn his way in. But he knew this. He was here. He'd shown up. And he'd keep showing up for as long as they'd let him. Because that's what love looked like when you'd already lost everything. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts. Just presence. Just consistency. Just being there when it mattered and not expecting anything in return. Just showing up. Again and again. For however long it took. The playground sounds faded into background noise as Dominic watched his son run toward the swings, already laughing, already trusting, already whole despite his absence. And Dominic understood with crystal clarity that his job wasn't to force his way into Liam's life. It was to become someone worthy of being invited in. That would take time. Maybe years. Maybe forever. But he had time now. He had a chance. And he wasn't going to waste it. Not this time.